Thank you for downloading The Luminous Mind, episode 31.
That which we persist in doing becomes easier to do, not because the thing itself is easier, but because our power to do so has increased.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Shelley Andrus. Shelley was one of Idaho's first online virtual elementary teachers when she began teaching with the Idaho Virtual Academy in 2002. In her 10th year of virtual elementary education, she now works for Bonneville Online Schools as a lead teacher. Shelley is a graduate of Brigham Young University, and she enjoys serving in the community and participating in grassroots political processes. She also has served and led nonprofit organizations as well as owning and managing a family real estate business. Her greatest passion and pleasure in life is her family. She and her husband of 15 years are raising 4 children. So welcome, Shelley.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
She's just the sweetest lady, and so I'm so happy to have her join us. We've been lucky enough to acquire her this year in our online schools, and I actually knew Shelley quite a few years ago, and so when I saw that she had joined us, I was just overjoyed. She's an amazing lady. So
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Well, I've kind of told the audience a little bit about you. Do you want to kind of expound upon with your family and your hobbies? And then, of course, we want to talk about your profession of teaching.
You bet. Well, I'll start with my hardest and greatest work, those kiddos of mine. I had a 7th grader, 6th grader, 4th grader, and a toddler who's almost 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, we've got our hands full. We had those first 3 in 3 years and then the surprise at the end. And as much as education is my profession, it's also my avocation in raising my kids and watching their different learning styles and their needs in the classroom and at home. And myself, I was public school educated in the standard brick and mortar classroom. And so each year we've looked at school choice and wondered if the public school is still working for my kids. And so far it has. So they are being educated in a public brick and mortar school while I help hundreds of kids work from home in a public school environment at their homes. So that's been a fun and wonderful experience because each child is unique, especially my own. But my husband of 15 years, we love to go bicycling together outdoors. I'm an avid reader, and I love to try new recipes that are typically gluten and sugar-free. And I love to dance. Jazzercise is my secret passion and outlet for life. That about covers what I get out of 7 days a week.
Oh, great. I have not heard jazzercise forever. It seems like the whole world is into Zumba, so, which I joke it's just Jane Fonda aerobics, restyled. So.
It's true. I love Zumba, and then I found jazzercise, and I actually love it more. So
great.
It's been fantastic.
That's fun. So you talked about your personal educational experience being in the brick and mortar schools. Why did you choose to teach alternative to the tradition?
I love that question because my experience has been more atypical. I was a gifted student throughout my educational experience, identified gifted. I know all students are gifted. In the school that I attended in upstate New York, they had a gifted pull-out enrichment program. So from the 4th to the 6th grade, I was taught in a non-traditional multi-grade level environment, and it was fantastic. It was a fantastic experience. So I actually graduated from Brigham Young with a degree in political science, and teaching was close to my heart because my mother is an educator with a master's in early childhood ed. She ran a Montessori classroom in the basement of our home, and we were raised in Montessori preschool education, my sisters and I.
Oh, wow. I didn't know all that.
Yeah, non-traditional education and school choice were close to my heart, but teaching for myself as a profession was not something I ever thought I would or could do because my mom is a brilliant educator, and she cast a long shadow that I didn't think that I could ever follow. And then I met Janet Eichley, and I know you know who she is. We all in Idaho who take advantage of school choice, we all can thank her for paving the way for charter school legislation, along with several other gifted legislators, advocates, and lobbyists. And she introduced me to this program to virtual education through Idaho Virtual Academy in its first year. It was the summer of 2002 that I met her. And she said, this is what we're doing. And I said, I want to be a part of it. It's amazing, the opportunities that it provides to students who would not otherwise benefit from the flexibility of a public school education at home were second to none. And the people who were assisting in the movement and who were working with Janet at Idaho Virtual Academy were incredible, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I began a non-traditional teacher licensure program that took a while to find, but once I found it, I did an alternate path to certification, and which just goes to show that there is there's constantly round pegs that are trying to be put in a square hole. And school choice, not only in the elementary program, but through high school and university studies, is essential in a dynamic world. I benefited from it, and so it's great to watch even young kids participate and benefit from the program.
That's great. So we were kind of talking before we started recording how, to get school choice into Idaho was no small task. Do you want to talk about that? Idaho Virtual Academy definitely led the way because it was such a non-traditional idea, and there really weren't very many charter schools in our state before that. So what was kind of tell us about the birth of the Idaho Virtual Academy. We talked about how for the first 3 years, our state superintendent withheld funding, trying to shut that down. So what was your experience with all that? Kind of give us the rundown of what your experience was.
Well, I'm not entirely sure about the lobbying process that brought the legislation to Idaho because that predates my interaction with it. But I'll tell you, and I get goosebumps thinking about it, Rebecca, I'll tell you, the moment I started working for the school and I saw how much effort and care was coming from every single side of the educational process, from administrators to teachers to parents, we now call them learning coaches at home. I have never seen a group of people more vested in the educational process as I did with Idaho Virtual Academy and with school choice and the charter movement. These parents and children were so grateful for the opportunity that they had been given to have the choice that was benefiting their family, to be at home, to not be on the bus for 3 hours round trip, to have a public schooling choice when there was family illness, or on the other side of the spectrum, to be on the U.S. ski team and to be traveling around the world, or to have a father who traveled internationally and wanting to have a school choice, and they own land here in Idaho and spend their summers here in Idaho. So they're taxpayers in Idaho. And so there are all these stories. And I think the people and the stories I fell in love with. And so, we started Idaho Virtual Academy thinking, as far as a teacher standpoint, it's all good. We're accredited. There's legislation that's approved us. The funding is supposed to be coming our way. We have a robot school. We're working toward 2,000 enrollment. That was, it was just so exciting, and so many tears and stories of gratitude filled my inboxes and my phone calls. We just knew we were doing something wonderful in Idaho. And then all of a sudden they started to have hiccups, and it was coming from our state superintendent's office. And it seemed that she didn't feel like this was a valid schooling option, that we could verify that our students were learning, that we were legitimate. She was second-guessing everything that we as a school were creating and seeing happening at homes and in the minds of these students. And she, almost single-handedly and unilaterally was trying to shut down Idaho Virtual Academy by withholding funding. How long could we keep going if we had no money and couldn't pay our bills? And, Idaho Virtual Academy was very fortunate to be a K12 managed school, K12 corporate out of Herndon, Virginia, which is our curriculum provider here at Bonneville Online. They also managed the school for Idaho Virtual Academy, and so they were forgiving in their collecting of funds and, pulled out all the stops to give us the time that we needed at Idaho Virtual Academy to tell our story to the legislators and to let people know that we are changing lives and giving public schooling options to kids who would otherwise not be able to have a public school choice. And the legislators heard these stories and met these students and families and parents, and they saw it too. They wanted to know, willing to do whatever they needed to keep this choice available, and with it all charter school options in Idaho, which is great. It was a scary time for a while, but we're way down the road now, and there are so many more choices. And one of my big philosophies is, when it comes to school choice, it's the consumer who benefits, which is students benefit when there are schooling choices.
That's for sure. Just to give our audience an idea of our demographic in Idaho, you have a huge mountainous area right in the middle, and then you have pockets of like the west and the east and the north. And so it's really kind of a rural area. I mean, what she's talking about is that some of these kids really have to ride the bus for hours. And so to be able to have an option that you can stay home and not have 4 hours of your day spent riding a bus is a major advantage. Not to mention Idaho we don't have the funding base to hire really expensive teachers. A lot of our schools are very, we just hold the very minimum, of what we have to educate kids. So this gives us a chance, it gives students a chance to have access to the best curriculum around the world. So I don't know why a rural state like Idaho wouldn't just have jumped right in there and got on board with virtual education. What is your thoughts about virtual education for elementary students? Because that was really a sticking point, that they didn't want a first grader not having any interaction with an actual person, just sitting there in front of a screen. What's your take on that?
Well, the K12 curriculum corporate philosophy was always about the appropriate use of technology based on age and child development, and that's how they wrote their curriculum, which is something that we as teachers always got behind, because it wasn't about plugging in a 5 or 6 year old in front of a computer for several hours a day. It was about providing an enriching curriculum appropriately delivered through technology when it's appropriate, but also empowering parents to be the primary instructor. So many times I talk to learning coaches or parents who are saying, I wanted to homeschool my child, but I didn't know where to get started, and how was I going to know that they were going to achieve everything they needed to by the end of the school year? And so, when they have teacher's guides that walk them through teaching processes and methodologies and different approaches with extension activities, they have all the tools that they need to be the direct instructor, and then the confidence that not only is the curriculum providing everything they could have ever hoped that their child could learn in that school year, but also the resource of the certified public teacher that is accessible to the parent to call at any time or to meet with their student at any time, if not regularly, once a week online. The technology thing was an issue, but it wasn't anything to be feared. It just needed to be understood. How are you using technology with a K-3 student? And once they saw that it was just the medium through which we were delivering the instruction to the parents, it made sense. It made sense that it was developmentally appropriate.
Well, and one of the things that I've loved about, I've used K12 for 10 years, and one of the things that I've loved is watching it grow and change and develop. And I'm now actually schooling our last kid using K12, and it's really fun, all the extra little games that they've added in that really help reinforce the stuff that the parent's teaching, because he's only first grade or something, but there's so many fun extra little things that he gets to do. And it definitely goes to show you that a for-profit company like K12, they really do invest the time and the energy into updating their programs and trying to provide the best quality education that they can. So I love your take on it. That's some exciting things that we were talking about. So you told us that you have kind of a non-traditional philosophy anyway, but how has it changed over time?
Well, it's growing and expanding. Since 2002, I've seen a lot of school choices pop up, and I've seen a lot of students enroll with Idaho Virtual Academy and unenroll. And I've seen them return to brick and mortar. I've seen them try other virtual school options, other charter options, and come to Bonneville Online like I now have. And so I think I guess the biggest philosophical change I've had is there's not one schooling choice that matches every student every year. And as things change, that I needed to be okay with the consumer, the capitalistic approach of education. And so I had to let go of students over time and realize that whatever choice the learning coach, the parent was making was a well thought out best choice for the child and the family. So I have expanded my school choice that I'm behind, and honestly I'm behind everything. I'm behind whatever's best for the child and the family during that particular year and circumstance in that child's life.
Yeah.
So we're just so lucky to have so many choices in Idaho.
Well, and I think it's pretty fun watching parents when they finally realize they have a choice, they really start to study, what their options are. And that's the most exciting thing, is that when they start to study it, they get really involved. And then all of a sudden you have a school that's going a totally different direction because you have parents that are there because they want to be, not because they're like, well, this is your zip code and this is where you go.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. Oh, another
Absolutely.
plug for K12. I'm always telling my kids, they're always testing about 2 years ahead of their peers in public school. And I really think that's because K12 is structured on a back east type school versus what they would get here in Idaho. And I just feel, like I said, blessed that I can have that kind of choice for my kids, that they, even though we live in a beautiful rural state, we have the options of the best schools from back east. So,
I would totally agree. I mean, when you think of the per pupil funding that Idaho has set aside, and we already know that it's at the very bottom of the amount compared to every other state in the union, but that entire dollar amount is buying an award-winning curriculum. It's not heating a building or providing bus transportation or, paying a janitorial staff. It is buying curriculum for your child.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is comparable to the top school or top state curriculum in the nation. So it's amazing.
So as a teacher, what's the best advice that you've ever received?
I thought a lot about this question. I didn't think of it as a teacher. I guess I did. As a professional educator.
Well, you can tell me what's your best advice as a parent. I'm okay with that too.
I think my best advice is less is more. And so I've shared my educational experience with you. And when I think about, let me give you a little bit of background to my advice. When I think about school choice, I think we end up in charter schools, we end up with kind of a barbell situation. We have really gifted advanced kids who are wanting an enriched curriculum so they can excel at their own rate and pace. And then we end up with kids who have special needs that aren't being met by the public school or the brick and mortar public school. And so they may test on a lower spectrum. Very gifted kids who don't perform like their peers in a classroom brick and mortar environment. So we've got kids testing on either end of the spectrum. Being a gifted student myself, I was awarded for my performance, and I was also a perfectionist. So I wanted to do perfectly on everything that I did. And so this advice might resonate with some listeners who have gifted kids or perfectionist complex issue kids. Because my performance as a student was always awarded based on my perfection product, I had a fear of turning in a product that was less than perfect. And so I have procrastination issues and accomplishment issues related to that idea. Like, I want it to be perfect the first time, so I'm either not going to give an effort or I'm going to delay my effort and turn in something late so it can be perfect. And becoming an adult and a professional and an educator and watching students struggle, it's been healing to myself. And so the idea that less is more, now in education, we are aware that this is an issue, awarding performance instead of awarding perseverance. And so, not only having a self-awareness that doing hard work is what we should acknowledge and praise and get more of from our students and ourselves, less about being perfect in the final product, more about the hard work in the process. We want kids who will work till the work is done and not wait until they can only turn in a perfect product.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I don't know if this is true, but I read an article once that talked about, we always look at the Asian culture for math, that they're the experts of how to do math. And a lot of people think it's because they spend umpteen hours a day. But one of the reasons why they do that is they're taught to persevere. A lot of times we will, you look at an American classroom, and if the child doesn't get the right answer, that child sits down and we call on somebody who can give us the right answer. But I've heard that in Asian, I haven't been there, so this is just what I've heard, but I've heard in an Asian culture that student sits at the board and he's getting help, he's getting assistance from his peers, but he's not just allowed to sit down, that he has to figure it out. And sometimes that takes that perseverance. So I love what you said, because I think that's a big problem with our society anymore, is that we don't have enough people that just persevere and push through it. So,
well, it is, and I think even more so now, taking that philosophy into account, we need parents and educators who coach children through that process. You can do this. I know it feels uncomfortable, and I know you've been put on the spot. We all make mistakes. We all learn by making mistakes. So much of a role in parenting and educating that can be attributed to teaching perseverance and modeling perseverance.
Yeah.
So often we're like, wow, that experience stunk because I didn't do a good job. I will never do that again. And that's not what we want to show our kids. We want to show our kids, hey, that was a bad experience, but I'm going to try it again, and it's going to get easier and easier. And that leads me into my absolute favorite quote, Ralph Waldo Emerson: that which we persist in doing becomes easier to do. Not because the thing itself is easier, but because our power to do so has increased.
Oh, I love that.
So keep on keeping on.
Great.
Before we move on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors.
Hey, fire starters, this is Mark, producer of The Luminous Mind. If you're like me, the thought of going out to the store and shopping is enough to make you want to crawl in a hole and hide. If that's you, then do your shopping online through Amazon. Just go to theluminousmind.net, click on the Amazon link, and shop away. Also, most of the books and resources that Rebecca and her guests discuss can be found on our Amazon links as well. Again, if you're like me, you have already accidentally signed up for Amazon Prime. So most of those purchases should have free shipping as well. Good luck!
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Shelley Andrus from Bonneville Online.
What do you think about socialization? I mean, K12 is definitely a education style that many children do at home. What do you think about socialization, and what do you do in your school to provide activities for kids?
Great question. K12 works hard to provide socialization opportunities through virtual socialization. And I think, again, this matches the student and the family's needs wherever they're at. I think if a parent wants socialization for their child and they want to homeschool, they will find plenty of opportunities from church or scouting or sports or participating in virtual classroom activities or K12 club activities. But back when we started IDVA back in 2002, we had a lot of face-to-face events. And then we didn't have, the attendance dropped off. And some of the feedback we heard was, we choose to be at home because we don't feel like we need the socialization. But again, it depends on the family at the year and what their particular needs are. So I am grateful with Bonneville Online that every Thursday we get our students together for an hour and a half for an educational experience, an art and craft, and a physical education experience. The kids group themselves off by ages, and it's a great opportunity for the kids to create friendships and to have a socialization outlet every week. But I think there are more opportunities than we are aware of within homeschooling co-op and, within the community.
Yeah.
itself.
Well, and we are really fortunate in Idaho that you don't necessarily have to attend the school in your zip code area to participate in those sports. That's not the case in a lot of places in the United States, and so we are pretty fortunate with that. What would you say some of the biggest obstacles that you face are, and what have you learned from those obstacles?
Another great question. One of the challenges I face is there are so many inputs. I have a lot of people sharing best practices with me from several departments at the State Department of Education and several departments at K12 corporate and local administration and blogs and Twitter feeds. There's a lot of people saying, hey, try this. This is new. This is great. Not to mention all the usernames and passwords that go with all of them. So I think for me, beginning with an end in mind, deciding month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, what am I trying to accomplish? And then filtering out all these really great inputs to see if they match my objectives that I'm trying to achieve in my job and with the students that I'm working with and the teachers I'm working with. So beginning with an end in mind is a filter to all those things. The other thing I think that's challenging is year one mentality. And this plagued me for a while at Idaho Virtual Academy because the only thing that's constant in virtual instruction is that everything changes.
That's for sure.
And so the year one mentality is I'm teaching a new grade, I'm in a new building, I've got a new curriculum, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to do this, and how do I get started? And because so many things change in virtual instruction, whatever position you sit at, as whether you're a learning coach or you're a teacher, there's a tendency to get overwhelmed and feel like you're not a professional. But what I've had to do is take a step back and say, no, I am a professional. I know what I'm trying to achieve. As my friend said, you're trying to move the needle. You're trying to get your students from point A to point B, what they don't know to what they need to know. Taking a step back and reaffirming that I am a professional. I know how to do this. And even if my tools change from year to year, I've got this.
Yeah, that's a advantage and disadvantage, I guess, all at the same time with virtual learning. Is that the neat thing is that we're not working out of 30-year-old textbooks where we still have Pluto as a planet. We move with the science as it comes. So that's
right.
Great. What are some successes that you've seen?
I think, like some of the success stories I told that we got to share with the legislators are my favorites. Just watching kids thrive, watching them have finally the environment that they needed to be able to achieve their very best, having their parents being their direct instructors who love them the very, very most and who can provide the positive reinforcement that they need. That's been wonderful. And I'll tell you, I've also seen parents who have become very academically confident. The parents who didn't feel like they knew very much from their elementary school experience, and now all of a sudden they're feeling expert about education and their academic knowledge. In fact, I had a parent say to me, she'd been with our program for 4 years. She took a second grader to the end of the sixth grade year, and she said, I'm enrolling in college this year. She said, I never felt like I knew enough to go to college, but she says, I do now. Oh, and wow. What an example that was to her kids. But now I've just seen kids just do so well and be so proud of themselves. That's the best part.
Well, and virtual education definitely spurs a family learning environment. I think that's very conducive to children grasping concepts and stuff when they see their parents working to do that as well. So we've talked about one of my old teachers. She's since retired, but was Margaret Skimmyhorn. And one of the things that she used to tell me, because I used to struggle with that I wasn't smart enough to homeschool my kids, but she said, Rebecca, one of my best schooling mothers was a girl who didn't even finish her high school diploma, and it's because she had a humble attitude where it literally became they were learning together because it was stuff that she hadn't done before. But she said that her children were just excellent. They were academics and stuff because she valued the fact that they needed that education, so she was very diligent about it. But then the fact that she was humble and she learned along with them was one of the reasons why her children thrived. So what are some personal habits that you have that help make you successful?
When it comes to what I've shared with learning coaches, flexibility within constraints, that's my motto, because we are a public schooling environment. And so while we get to school at home, we're not technically homeschoolers. So that means a week's worth of school needs to be done every week. Weekend privileges don't begin until those required activities are done. And I also have that same, methodology in my professional assignments, that I'm flexible, yes, because I work from home too. But I can't let what I needed to get done this week spill over into next week. Otherwise, I don't feel like a success, and I won't be a success to those who are watching my performance. So I love the flexibility I get, but when I use that flexibility to my advantage, I don't finish out that week or sometimes that day until I get done what I need to, even if that means, early hours or late hours. But flexibility within constraints.
Yeah, I like that. And I think the flexibility, children learn that when they have that flexibility and constraints, because I noticed with my children that once they figured that out, they became very motivated to finish their schoolwork because they had more time to play either during the day or, an extra day off. So that's great.
That is helpful.
So what is one thing that you're doing with your students that you're most excited about?
Well, I'll tell you, I had more direct involvement at Idaho Virtual Academy and my classroom there, and there were some really exciting things that I was doing in my Blackboard Collaborate classroom, constantly sharpening the saw through that tool because I loved connecting the kids through virtual socialization. It was a game to me. It was fun. So I'm bringing that energy to Bonneville Online. Here at Bonneville Online, they get to have face-to-face socialization, so that need to interact virtually isn't that high because most of our kids are local here. But there are other things that I'm excited about is using technology differently for project-based learning here at Bonneville Online. And so I can't speak exactly what it is, but there's a couple things in the works, just getting kids to leverage technology. They're natives to technology. We sit here and want to read a manual or watch a YouTube video or, take a class on how to do something. And they'll just hop in and click everything and figure it out and create videos and presentations and use new tools. So those are project-based learning through technology are things that I'm excited to use more with Bonneville Online.
Yeah, through my interactions of talking to different people, that's kind of where the high school and the college applications are headed, where they want to see what you've been doing and they want you to show it in some sort of online format, either through a blog or through some sort of project that you've put together that you can access from online. So I support your efforts there because that's headed in a good direction. So what are some of your long-term goals?
I'll tell you, if you would ask me 5 years ago, I would have said superintendent of public instruction in the state of Idaho. And now that I'm in the middle of raising these kids and thinking launching them out of my home, that's really my long-term goal. And not just college and career readiness. I love that somebody went to an administrator's presentation on Common Core, and he said, I don't need college and career readiness. I need out-of-the-basement readiness. And the man just described his son who has a master's degree who's living in his basement, and he can't figure out why because he has college and career readiness. Now, I really would like to continue to be involved in the political process along with the virtual education and school choice, but really at the forefront of my long-term goals is raising a happy and healthy family. So that's what I'm working on for the next 15 years.
Great. Well, and we talk about, I never really got to this question, but we talked about discussing this. What do you think a parent's role is in lobbying for their choice? Because, we see the other side, or I have seen the other side of, you have a strong public teachers union out there that kind of shut this down because they see it as a threat to their jobs. I mean, how does a parent lobby for their choice in education?
Well, it's such a tough discussion, Rebecca, especially for parents who are schooling at home because they're like, oh my gosh, one more thing. I mean, we know what's on our plates right now. But I'll tell you, if you can tap yourself into an informational network that keeps you involved in what's sitting on the education committee at the state legislature to know what's being discussed, watchdog group, and I'm trying to think of the Twitter feed that I follow, and I can't even remember the name of it. Maybe you can help me out with it. But just so that you have an awareness, and then know who your legislators are. Use election day and do a mini unit with your family, with your children, your students, and show them how to get on to the legislature's webpage and use the map tool to find your voting district and to find out which legislative district and House and Senate districts you live in, know who your representatives are. And, even if you're like one step behind your kids in this instruction, just be humble and jump in and go through the process at least once a year prior to Election Day. And then, do your best to subscribe to a news feed. Bring your kids into it, because if you bring your kids into it, it's not one more thing for you. It's part of your educational process with your kids.
That's true.
And let them know what's at the forefront of discussion for education, not only at the state level, but at the national level.
Yeah.
And show them how easy it is to click right underneath their name is that email address and send a constituent letter to your representative and say, or even a hello letter. We're a schooling at home family, and education choice is not only important to us, but it's essential to our way of life.
Well, and another great thing that we've done is we've actually invited them over to our home. And if they know there's going to be a big group here, they usually come. And but then they can see, they can have some hands-on seeing, because one of the problems that we face with virtual schooling is that a legislator can go to a brick and mortar school and they can physically see what the kids are doing. Even in a charter school, they can physically see. But in a virtual school, we're just kind of out there, that there's no face and no building and nothing to identify to. So sometimes doing something like that helps give it a face, that they see your face when they vote. So.
What a great idea, Rebecca. I totally support that. And state legislators are so open to those opportunities, just to invite them to come out and see what your schooling environment looks like in your home. And just to legitimize for them, even, Superintendent Tom Luna, he was so supportive in Idaho of school choice. And just last year, I invited him to come to one of my Blackboard Class Connect classrooms and meet my students and talk about, some of his platforms and what he was working on. And he was beside himself giddy. He actually came to the Meridian office and they took pictures of him. And he was just so thrilled that he had no idea. All these years we've had a relationship with him, he had no idea what our virtual classroom looked like. And it was amazing. So those reach-out opportunities are invaluable.
Yeah, that's great. So what advice or encouragement would you give to somebody who's just starting out, either a teacher who wants to choose something alternative or maybe a parent?
Well, I think that perseverance discussion extends to this question, because you just got to keep doing it. And I know you're going to ask me if there's any book or resource, and I'll tell you, the Love and Logic parenting technique and the classroom management technique, I think, are second to none. And we're lucky to have the Meachams here in Southeast Idaho, and she runs a webpage called schooleffectivelyathome.com. That's schooleffectivelyathome.com.
That's
and
great.
She has so many support tools, because you end up wearing a lot of hats when it comes to at-home education, whether parent or teacher. So just keep on. Make a decision for at least this semester. I highly recommend a year, and just stick with it. There's a learning curve, but there are so many more benefits than there are challenges, for sure.
Yeah. You can't keep pulling up the roots to see if the plant is growing,
So true.
So you gotta stick with it. I'm definitely a believer in consistency. So what changes would you like to see in the future in the world?
World peace. I think we're going in great directions, like I said, from elementary education through university studies to have school choice. And one of the challenges I see is that sometimes virtual education is trying to recreate a brick and mortar classroom on the internet, and they're missing out on this dynamic, they call it flipped classroom, project-based learning, where the kids get to go on this explorative approach to their education. I'll tell you, I watched a presentation at a conference a while ago, and they talked about this idea as a gaming theory to education. Like, we'll turn back the clock a little bit and talk about Zelda, because that was a video game of our youth, but trying to rescue the princess. How many different paths are there to rescuing the princess? What points can you get on different levels, and how do you master each level? Well, it's unique to each child. I would love to see more options to this education method, where a teacher says, to get an A in this class, you need to have 900 points. You can achieve those points by watching this video, doing this presentation, writing this paper, reading this book, passing this test. All these different ways that and then the students can pick their own learning style and find find their strengths among those different paths to rescuing the princess or achieving the A. They can let education be designed for them. And then there's no more curve and grading. Everyone can achieve an A if they want it because they can choose their own path.
Well, and I love what you're saying. It really puts the child on a self-directed learning environment. And I think when you finally teach a child that their education rests on their shoulders and that they're responsible for it, I think that the possibilities are endless because that really drives their enthusiasm. And then you see, you're no longer having to force somebody to learn something. They're doing it completely and utterly on their own. So that's
Absolutely.
a great thing. So before we say goodbye, is there any final parting words that you have? And then maybe give us an idea of how we can connect with you.
I have no web presence right now, but you're welcome to email me at my work email. It's Andrus, ANDRUS, for Shelley, at D93 for District 93, K12.id.us. And my parting words of advice, I think, is just repeating that quote from earlier. That which we persist in doing becomes easier to do, not because the thing itself is easy, but because our power to do so has increased.
That's great.
So I just wish you're welcome. Thank you. And I wish everybody, all the very best in the path for their own educational experience.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shelley. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Shelley Andrus and the Bonneville Online Schools, go to our website, theluminousmind.net. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on iTunes and YouTube, and now we're also on Stitcher. Help us to continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education